What happened, Michael? Tell us your story.
Well, what happened in the very beginning was I had a normal life, pretty much like anybody else would. And then in about 2005, approximately 8 years ago, I began experiencing unusual happenings, odd happenings. At first, I really didn't pay much attention to them. Things like furniture being moved around in my apartment. I was like, did I put that there? What's that doing there? And then other small things like damage to my property, to my clothing. Small things, but it's called what is known as small but noticeable damage. And at about the same time, I also noticed, I don't know, just kind of weird things happening. Like, for instance, when I was driving down the street, oncoming traffic would flash their lights at me, blink their lights, or turn their lights on or off. And sometimes that happens, someone will turn their lights on or they'll turn them off, whatever.
Right.
But
they probably, depends if you had your brights on, maybe they thought you didn't have your headlights on, right?
No, this is when I had no lights on during the day.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't specify that. During the day, and some cars do have the lights running all the time, but these were the bright lights usually, and there's a distinction between those two. And I didn't really notice it at first. Then after a while, I began to notice it. And then also, when I was walking on the street, walking to a store or something like that, cars that would pass by me would honk their horn a couple of times. And, I didn't really I never made the connection. I just thought people were honking. People do honk their horns. Then I got these sustained honks when I was the only guy on the street, and I kept saying to myself, what's going on here? What's happening here? It was weird to me. And then also another thing that I noticed, these are all methods of parts of organized stalking or gang stalking. I prefer the word organized stalking. There's many different methods and techniques that are used, and I was experiencing them just by noticing them. And then when I did investigation and research, I said, I went on the internet by myself. Nobody was there to explain. I was by myself living in an apartment in Hollywood, California, as a writer, doing screenwriting, and I would spend weeks at a time in my apartment writing. And when this started happening, I had nowhere else to really turn to. There was no one that had any answers for me. So I went on the internet and I started to explore and putting in keywords, brighting lights, enter, exit. I started entering these things into the searches that I did.
Right.
And I got back that these are all symptoms, classic symptoms of being a targeted individual.
When did this all start for you, Michael?
Approximately 2005, very mildly. It kind of blended into my regular life. I really didn't, it wasn't like one day I was getting bombarded and harassed. It evolved very slowly from zero to full power over a course of time, constantly gaining momentum and escalating in terms of the harassment.
The obvious question, Michael, would be why you? Were you an experiment, or were they after you for some specific reason? And we'll get into the who in a second, but
okay.
Why you?
Well, that's a really great question, George. I tried to figure that out a lot of times, and there is no, in my particular case, some targets I understand have had their perpetrators confront them and say, why this is happening to you? And they would give them a reason. But for me, there was no answers. And
you probably don't even know who they are.
No, I really don't. That when you asked that question, it really stirred up the question that constantly was the biggest question that all targeted individuals have is why? Why me? What have I done to deserve this?
Which makes me think it's an experiment to see what they can do.
Correct.
or how far they can push you or manipulate you.
That's absolutely correct.
Roger, how often does this happen to people?
Well, we hear from 3 to 4 to 5 individuals daily, new people that are targeted individuals, but not only just from the United States. I just had 2 sets of individuals come in for evaluation from Australia. And I'm hearing people from all the different parts of the world, from Europe, from Middle East. So the main thing to understand is that the intelligence agencies around the world really have shared the technology, and they are all doing experiments in all the different locations of the world to attempt to see what they can do, not only through mind control technology to control the general public, but also to be able to program other people to do tasks like become perpetrators.
In your case, Michael, any idea how they found you?
I really don't. It was such a like the blending from my regular life to this to absolute, to like really. It took a long time for me to realize what was happening to me. I shook it off. I said, this is probably just, I did. At one point, I thought, this has got to be some kind of hoax. Somebody's playing a prank on me. They've gone to some elaborate length to go out of their way to see how I'm going to react to this practical joke. At the lower levels, it almost seemed like it was that type of harassment, minor, but still harassment the same from your regular life. All of a sudden, you're getting these things happening. They're very disturbing, if they continue to happen, and that's the whole goal of it. So I really don't know exactly when I realized, but it was sometime after it started. When I look back in hindsight, probably it was going on for up to a year and a half to 2 years almost, that things got to the point where I realized that they weren't a coincidence anymore, that these events were happening pretty much almost predictable. And when I got to that point, I said, there is something going on here. Something is orchestrating this, and something is controlling this, and they've singled me out for some reason. And to this day, I still don't know why. No one's come forward. That's the biggest puzzle for targets. Nobody ever comes forward and gives them any inkling of an idea of why they've been chosen. Or I'll tell you honestly, I do know some of the motivating factors for some of these people. From what I understand in my research, in my studies, and talking to other targets, some of the purposes some of the reasons for the actual crime being committed are for simple things that are obvious, like hatred, revenge, jealousy, or actually just for sport. For some of these people that are seriously sociopathic or psychotic, these are vents for them. The last time I fled to my parents' house in North Carolina, and from there, about 3 weeks after that, I flew out to see Roger, and thank goodness for that, because the information and the understanding that he shared with me made it so much easier for me to deal with, because otherwise it was just a huge puzzle and a question mark just shoved at me. And now things, not that they were logical, but they made sense to some degree. At least I could understand what the possibilities were, and that made it a lot easier. Once you understand that what you're dealing with is technology, for me it removed the fear, because then I knew that it wasn't something that was wrong with me or something demonic, something
which you thought. I think at some point.
Things, with no answers, you turn to possibilities. You're like, geez, could there be something wrong with me? No, there's nothing wrong with me. You think it could be something biblical? Is there what is this?
Yeah, is it a message from above?
Possession? I didn't realize But then once I understood that it was technology and people were behind it, that made it a lot easier to digest, honestly.
Did you hear the voices too, Michael?
No.
You didn't? Okay, so
no,
they didn't bombard you with voices.
If you want to go into this further, the other part, there's two other parts to this besides whatever questions you have to ask me. There's two other main parts. One is the dreams, which are artificial, which are inserted into the targeted individual's mind while they sleep. And it's substituted for their REM sleep. When they normally would be getting their rapid eye movement sleep, the most essential form of sleep for your immune system, it's being taken away and substituted with artificial dreams. And the other thing is the directed energy. So if you wanted to go in...
let's talk for a moment about the dreams. We're going to hit this break, but we'll get right back into that next hour, too. Are you saying that they have the ability to create a dreamlike state, a picture, a story, and beam that into you, and it becomes so realistic in your dream? You think it's happening?
Oh, it totally. And I've spoken to every other target I've spoken to has experienced nearly the same, almost exactly identical description of what happens to them when they sleep. That's when most of the damage occurs, actually, is when you're asleep. They take you when you're asleep. They work on you when you're asleep with the dreams. You get burned when you sleep. You go to sleep, you go to sleep fine. You wake up with a huge burn on your leg. Most of the activity is done during the day. You may encounter organized stalkers, but after a while, that only lasts for the first 2 or 3 years of being a victim. After a while, that tapers off, and it happens intermittently, once in a while, very sporadically. Never happens to the way it did when you first started experiencing it. But most of the handiwork, as they refer to it as, the perpetrators, happens at night when the victim is the most vulnerable, when they're asleep.
And now these dreams that they would pump into you, what were they like?
Well, they're always the same. They're different scenarios, but basically it's the same. It's the same story over and over. It's you. You're seeing the dream through your eyes,
as you normally do.
Yes, and they're very vivid, real dreams. They're different than regular dreams because you'll have a nightmare once in a while, and while you're in the nightmare, it seems real.
Sure, it does.
But not like these things. These dreams are completely different, and after a while, you're able to distinguish what was and what is now. And you don't get your old dreams back. Now they're complete. It's not like once in a while they do it. This is every night that you go to sleep.
Are you still getting these dreams bombarded to you?
I am, but I actually am able to. I've developed my own set of survival techniques when the dream. Sometimes what happens is.
Hold on, Michael. We're at that point where we shall come right back. Let's get into your dream state again and explain what they've been doing, how you think they do it.
Well, what they do is in the dreams, you're very vulnerable when you sleep, and these dreams, they have the same scenario every time. You are the loser. You are the outcast. You are laughed at. You are taunted. You are chased. You've lost something you can't find. You put a set of keys down, and now for the rest of the dream, you're looking for them. You know you just had them here, but now you're looking for them, and they just disappear. Whatever. That it's always those same type of scenarios. And another thing that they do, another technique that they use within the dream, is to have other characters that are in the dream ask you questions.
In the dream?
Yes, they will ask you questions, and you are pretty much very submissive to that. You are very, they can extract whatever they want from you at that point. You have no guard up in your dream, and you may relinquish information you wouldn't normally relinquish.
Are they reading your dream state mind?
Well, they're doing that. They're monitoring the way you interact with the dream that they've set up for you. And simultaneously, while you're distracted with this dream in your mind, they are also doing something else, which is called, it's a type of hypnosis. And they are actually extracting memories and thoughts and the way you think from you while you're in this dream at the same time. And sometimes both. Sometimes they'll also be asking you questions during the dream. So you're not only being unconsciously being drained and unwittingly being drained of memories and thoughts and what actually makes you up as a human being and as a unique person, but they're also asking you actively during the dream.
Jeez. Truly incredible technology. Where are they, Michael, when this is going on? Are they in a van outside your house or what?
Well, actually, this crime is achieved today with the advance of technology. It's able to be achieved through a cell phone. So they can be up to several thousand miles away from you using the satellite system, going from satellite to satellite. When they hook up, they actually punch in a 10-digit number to get you. That's you. And then a different number for somebody else. And whoever is given access to this can hear what you're saying and hear what you're hearing and know your thoughts in real time. The computer grabs your brainwave and will be able to translate it into real words in real time. That's how advanced the technology is.
Just remarkable.
Yeah.
Now, you were talking about directed energy as well. What are they doing with that?
That is that's a little bit, well, it's using the same system. It's using the satellite system and the equivalent to the GPS system with the cellular system and the satellite system combined. That's because the cell phone is a satellite run or running off the towers, the cell towers that they have, either one, and they will be able to, the perpetrators will be able to actually direct a very fine microwave beam, invisible. One of the words for the invisible crime. They will be able to burn you. You will not be able to see or even actually feel it while you're asleep. You'd think that when you wake up with a second-degree burn on any part of your body, that you'd certainly feel it when it was being done. But these are not burns they're unlike any other kind of burn. They're not like an externally caused burn you get from a match or from a hot comb or an iron or a stove. These are burns that occur from the inside out.
Yeah.
And they are exactly
It's
backwards.
like you've been radiated.
Correct. They come from the inside out, and they, unlike regular burns, they blister about a week later. And whereas an externally caused burn would blister immediately and then be healing maybe up to a week or two later. So they're very different burns, and they do not look like regular burns. I have some pictures, I had hundreds of pictures, but my editor, my publisher, really only wanted to put several in there. So there are several good examples in the book of what they look like. Most of them are linear. They're just a line that looks like a scratch. But they can be geometric patterns. There can be a triangle or there could be a rectangle. But usually they're just straight lines, at least in my experience on me and the people that I know.
If you could confront these people, Michael, what would you ask them? What would you say to them? In the beginning there was a lot of anger, because I felt cheated of my regular life, and I was very angry about that because I had before this I had a very, very nice life, and I've pretty much gotten that back. But during the beginning, when this was overwhelming me, it made me frustrated and angry, and those are natural reactions to being the unwitting subject of tests and torture
and being experimented upon like a lab rat. I mean, who wouldn't be upset? And not only that, the worst part about it is, George, it's U.S. tax dollars that pay for all of this.
Under the table, but tax dollars nonetheless.
Yes.
Michael, the people who are being bombarded with this microwave technology, maybe hearing voices, static, whatever, are they trying to drive them crazy or to plant information in their heads?
I think they're trying to, as Roger said before, I think that they're trying to brainwash them and, to an extent, see how much they can manipulate them and what works on them and what doesn't, and what kind of results they get from doing different techniques. And in my experience, they're doing it to drive the individual crazy or trying to push them over the edge. I don't think they're. You know, you wish you were like the target of some kind of divine knowledge where they're trying to put stuff into you. That might actually be some kind of a benefit. It's like, hey, how did this guy suddenly rise? How did he graduate college in 1 year? Because they're feeding him all this information. That would be great. But unfortunately, it's the opposite. It's all very negative stuff, and there's really not much to be gained from it from the person. Perhaps the perpetrators are gaining huge amounts and vast amounts of knowledge and research and studies at the cost of our lives. When I say our, I say any other targeted individual or any other victim of this crime. It really comes at a great expense. And as Roger can probably tell you from experience, once the harassment starts, it generally lasts for life in some form or another. Some people do escape, or they are actually they're able to disable their chips or whatever, or their target, their group, the perpetrators lose interest in them, or they've gotten all they can get out of them, and then they don't waste any more money on them, because obviously to be a victim is a great expense to your perpetrators, to follow, to get the technology, to get people to monitor you, to follow you around on the ground, in cars, in other parts of the world. It's a huge expense, but when you're the government, you have no budget. You can do whatever you want.
When you tell people about this, Michael, what do they say?
Well, I've learned to be very cautious about who I tell, and when I was with my parents, I was so obsessed with finding out. This is earlier on, several years ago. We would talk about it. We would talk about, quote unquote, it all the time, and my mother would say at the table, "Could we please not talk about it anymore?" And I'd say, "No, we haven't even begun to talk about it. We have to exhaust this thing. Are you kidding me?" So you can't. And that my parents were an example of the way other people, they get sick and tired of hearing this story over and over. So I don't really tell people that much.
All right. Well, we're coming back. We're going to talk a little bit more and take phone calls and stories on Coast to Coast AM. Indeed, and we're going to take your phone calls and your stories. Have you been targeted? Michael Fitzhugh Bell and Roger Tulsis with us on Coast to Coast AM. Michael Bell with us, the invisible crime. Michael, do you think any of these people will be prosecuted because what's apparently happening, they're kidnapping you?
Correct. Well, see, the thing is, if they're part of the government pretty much guarantees them immunity. They will claim something. As Roger will probably back me up on this, they always mention these words and everything gets thrown out of court. It's a matter of national security. When they say that sentence, it kind of excuses them from everything. It's like their diplomatic immunity plates on cars. They're immune to all speeding tickets and everything, and that's what these people have going for them. They're pretty much immune. I'm sure Roger can expand on that.
Roger, how immune are they?
Well, every case that I've ever seen, it gets dismissed under national security. They won't even talk about it. They don't acknowledge it. It's the same thing as you get the same kind of problem you get with the UFO kind of situations where they won't even want to talk about it to any degree at all. So There has been some cases, and every one that I've ever seen was dismissed under national security.
All right, let's take some calls while we continue chatting with Roger and Michael. Let's go to Alan in Springfield.